The little girl had not spoken a single word in 3 years, but on the afternoon everyone finally gave up on her. She walked across a crowded hospital lobby, placed one trembling hand into the palm of a stranger, and whispered something that made her billionaire mother collapse to the floor. Nobody understood why a child who had ignored doctors, therapists, teachers, and even her own mother suddenly chose a tired single father in a faded work jacket. Nobody knew that the man had spent years learning how to survive silence, guilt, and loss. And nobody could have imagined that the secret connecting them would change 3 lives forever. If you believe kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances can change someone's life, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel so you can remain part of our family and our growing community of people who still believe that one small act of kindness can make an enormous difference. The man was named Everett Callahan, a 38-year-old single father who worked maintenance and security jobs around the city while raising his 9-year-old son, Milo. Everett was not wealthy, famous, or particularly impressive at first glance. His clothes were clean but worn, his old pickup truck had more scratches than paint, and there were permanent shadows beneath his eyes from years of putting his son's needs before his own. But Everett carried himself with the quiet discipline of someone who had endured things he rarely discussed. Years earlier, he had served in the military, where he had learned that courage was not always about running toward danger. Sometimes courage was simply waking up the next morning and choosing to keep living when part of you desperately wanted to disappear. His life had become smaller after leaving the service. He had lost friends, lost his marriage, and eventually lost almost everything he thought adulthood was supposed to look like. His former wife had moved across the country and rarely contacted Milo, leaving Everett to become both parents. He never complained about it. Every morning, he packed Milo's lunch, checked his homework, drove him to school, and went to work. Every afternoon, he hurried home because Milo was the one person who still made him feel needed. He had learned that children did not require perfect parents. They required someone who stayed. That afternoon, Everett was repairing a damaged security door at a prestigious children's rehabilitation center when he noticed a little girl sitting alone near the enormous glass windows. Her name was Brielle Whitmore, although Everett did not know that yet. She was 8 years old and the daughter of Cassandra Whitmore, one of the wealthiest businesswomen in the country. Cassandra owned a global technology empire, appeared regularly in financial magazines, and had built her reputation by turning failing companies into billion-dollar successes. Yet none of that mattered when she looked at her daughter. Brielle had stopped speaking after a devastating accident 3 years earlier. Doctors had found no physical reason she could not talk. Therapists believed the silence was connected to trauma, but nobody could determine what had frightened the child so deeply. She communicated through small gestures, drawings, and sometimes tears. Cassandra had spent millions searching for answers. Specialists had traveled from different countries. Therapists had tried experimental approaches. Nothing worked. Every new appointment ended with the same heartbreaking result: Brielle remained silent. Cassandra loved her daughter desperately, but love had become tangled with fear. She had begun measuring Brielle's progress like quarterly financial reports, convincing herself that if she simply found the right doctor, the right treatment, or the right facility, she could fix everything. Her desperation made her impatient, and her impatience made Brielle retreat even further. That day, Brielle had been sitting beside the window holding a small red toy truck. Everett noticed it because Milo owned one exactly like it. He stopped repairing the door and watched from a distance. He did not approach her immediately. He had learned from experience that frightened people often needed someone who could remain nearby without demanding anything. After several minutes, Brielle dropped the truck. Everett quietly walked over, picked it up, and placed it on the chair beside her. He did not ask her name. He did not ask why she was sad. He simply returned to his work. A few minutes later, the toy fell again. Everett picked it up again. This happened 4 times. On the 5th time, Brielle deliberately pushed the truck toward him. Everett looked at her, then pushed it gently back. For the first time that day, the little girl smiled. Nobody noticed except a receptionist across the lobby, who immediately called Cassandra. Cassandra rushed downstairs expecting to find some kind of breakthrough from another therapist. Instead, she saw Everett sitting several feet away from her daughter, quietly repairing the door while Brielle pushed the little red truck toward him and waited for him to return it. Cassandra froze. Her daughter had not played with a stranger in years. She approached carefully, but the moment Brielle saw her mother, the smile disappeared. The little girl pulled the toy against her chest and turned away. Cassandra's heart sank. Everett noticed the change and understood something important. Brielle did not need another person telling her what to do. She needed someone who would allow her to choose. Cassandra asked Everett what he had done. He simply explained that he had done nothing. He had picked up the truck when it fell. That answer frustrated Cassandra because she had spent years paying people to do everything for her daughter. Yet this exhausted maintenance worker had accomplished more in 20 minutes than specialists had accomplished in months. She offered him money. Everett refused. She offered him a position. He refused again. What Cassandra did not understand was that Everett had seen the same expression in Milo's eyes after his own mother left. It was the look of a child who had stopped expecting adults to stay. The next afternoon, Everett returned to the rehabilitation center for another maintenance job. Brielle was waiting near the same window. This time, she had 2 toy trucks. She pushed one toward him. Everett smiled. Their strange friendship continued quietly. He never asked Brielle to speak. He never praised her for being brave. He never told her that she needed to get better. He simply sat nearby, fixed broken things, and let her decide when she wanted to interact with him. Eventually, Brielle began communicating more. She drew pictures of a house, a red truck, a little boy, and a man standing beside a tree. Everett realized she was telling a story. One afternoon, she drew a picture of a car surrounded by dark lines. Then she drew herself inside it. Then she drew her mother. Finally, she drew a man with a strange symbol on his jacket. Everett stared at the drawing. Something about it unsettled him. He recognized the symbol. It was associated with a private security contractor he had encountered during his military service. Cassandra saw the drawing and became visibly shaken. She had never seen it before. That was the moment the mystery surrounding Brielle's silence began to change. The accident 3 years earlier had been officially classified as a traffic collision. Cassandra had believed her driver lost control after another vehicle suddenly crossed into their lane. But Everett's military instincts told him something was wrong. Brielle's drawing suggested she had witnessed something that frightened her, something her mind had buried because remembering it was too painful. Cassandra finally admitted that she had never been able to understand why Brielle had stopped speaking after the accident. She had assumed the crash itself was the cause. Everett gently suggested that perhaps Brielle was trying to tell them something she had been unable to explain with words. Instead of forcing her, they allowed her drawings to speak for her. Piece by piece, Brielle revealed that another vehicle had followed their car before the crash. She remembered seeing a man outside the vehicle afterward. She remembered her mother arguing with someone before the accident. Most frightening of all, she remembered the symbol on the man's jacket. Cassandra recognized it. The contractor had once worked for her company. Years earlier, he had been dismissed after a serious security violation. Suddenly, Cassandra understood why the accident had never made sense. But the biggest revelation came when investigators reopened the case and discovered that the original accident report contained inconsistencies. Someone had altered details about the vehicle that had been following Cassandra's car. The man responsible had never been charged because there had not been enough evidence. Now Brielle's drawings provided the missing connection. Cassandra wanted Everett to know how much he had helped, but he told her that Brielle had done the difficult part. She had found the courage to remember. Then came the moment nobody expected. Several weeks later, Brielle was standing beside Everett while Milo visited the rehabilitation center after school. Milo showed her the small red truck he had carried since childhood. Brielle stared at it. Then she looked at Everett. Her lips trembled. For 3 years, Cassandra had dreamed of hearing her daughter's voice. For 3 years, doctors had waited for a single word. Now, in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, Brielle finally spoke. Her voice was barely louder than a whisper. She said Everett's name. Cassandra covered her mouth. Everett stood completely still. Milo smiled. Brielle repeated his name, then reached for Cassandra's hand. Cassandra began crying so hard she could barely stand. She had spent years believing she had failed her daughter because she could not make her speak. But now she understood that healing could not be commanded. It could only be invited. Brielle had not spoken because somebody found the perfect treatment. She had spoken because somebody finally made her feel safe enough to choose her own moment. The investigation eventually led to the man connected to the old security contractor, and the truth about the accident came to light. But Cassandra discovered that solving the mystery was not the greatest gift Everett had given her. He had taught her how to be Brielle's mother again. Instead of scheduling Brielle's life down to the minute, Cassandra began spending quiet afternoons with her. She listened to her drawings. She learned her daughter's favorite games. She stopped asking whether Brielle was improving and started asking whether she was happy. Everett's life changed too. Cassandra offered him a high-paying security position, but he initially hesitated. He had spent years believing that accepting help meant admitting weakness. Cassandra reminded him that accepting a second chance was not weakness. Eventually, Everett accepted a position overseeing security and safety programs for the rehabilitation center. It allowed him to spend more time with Milo while helping families who reminded him of everything he had once lost. Milo became close friends with Brielle. The two children often played with their little red trucks in the center's garden during the afternoon. Sometimes Brielle talked constantly. Sometimes she became quiet again. Nobody panicked anymore. Because everyone had finally learned the lesson Everett understood from the beginning. Silence did not always mean there was nothing to say. Sometimes silence was simply a wounded heart waiting to feel safe. Months later, Cassandra stood beside Everett at a small community gathering organized to support children recovering from trauma. Brielle walked onto the stage holding her red truck. She looked at the crowd. Then she looked at her mother. Then she looked at Everett. With a confidence nobody could have imagined a year earlier, she told everyone that sometimes the person who saves you is not the person with the most money, the most degrees, or the most powerful name. Sometimes it is simply the person who stays. Cassandra reached for Everett's hand. He squeezed it gently. There was no romance between them that needed to be forced into the story. What existed was something more meaningful: trust, gratitude, friendship, and the quiet understanding of two adults who had survived different kinds of heartbreak and discovered that healing could happen when people stopped trying to control one another. Everett later kept the first drawing Brielle had ever given him in a frame above his desk. It showed 3 people standing beneath a bright blue sky. There was Brielle. There was Cassandra. And there was Everett. Above them, in crooked children's handwriting, were 4 simple words: people who stayed with me. Those words changed Everett forever. He had spent years believing that his greatest failure was everything he had lost. Brielle taught him that sometimes the past does not disappear. Sometimes it becomes the reason you are able to recognize another person's pain. And Cassandra learned something she would carry for the rest of her life: money could open doors, hire experts, and search the world for answers, but it could never replace patience, presence, forgiveness, and love. Before the story ends, leave a meaningful comment telling us what you believe the greatest lesson is. Is it the power of patience, the importance of forgiveness, or simply the courage to stay when someone else is hurting? If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Because sometimes, we are searching for a miracle so desperately that we forget miracles can look ordinary. They can look like a tired father picking up a child's toy for the 5th time. They can look like a mother finally learning to listen instead of fix. They can look like a frightened little girl finding one person who never demanded that she speak. And sometimes, the greatest second chance in life begins with something as simple as staying beside someone long enough for them to believe they are no longer alone.